All right, I'm on.
Hey, man, I am on. Good to see you from the house today. You're at the office. I'm here. So, should be back in, ready to roll, feeling better. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, just I'm over my sickness, and I think you're getting over yours.
I just can't smell anything right now. That's about it. So, but that's not too bad. There's certain things that, it helps to make things taste better to not smell them. So feeling okay. It's kind of like a metallic-y smell, but that's not what we're here for today. We've not done one of these in a while. And so it's time to just get one done. So happy Thursday to you. And you want to talk about what we're, or kind of intro what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, I think we're going to look at the idea of the Great Resignation, and think a little bit in terms of church and maybe some trends and things that we might be seeing in regards to this kind of global phenomenon.
That's it's pretty cool to talk about this. Like I said, I mean, I knew some of this stuff was happening in the market, but I did not really even think about this until I was actually talking on the phone with a missionary last week who was telling me that this was already taking place even within missions organizations now too, of people who are, now they're just leaving the field. And so, what does that look like? What does that mean? And so I think there's some things that obviously we don't figure out, like comment on what's happening around the country. But I know for some people, I think as they're going to listen to this, it's just probably a good question to think about. Like, okay, for you who's at home and maybe you are thinking about time to reshuffle, are there any theological maybe things to think about, to process before you make a jump? So should we just jump, or should there be some things that we need to think about? So that's kind of what I wanted to, I guess, talk through as well with you on this.
Yeah, I think that's where we're headed. So why don't we jump into prayer, and then we'll start working through it.
Let's do it.
All right, join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. All right. Start us off with the definition. If somebody's listening to this, doesn't even know what we're talking about, what is the Great Resignation?
All right. Well, I had it here. Hang on one second.
What is the formal definition?
All right. The formal definition is coming. I'm sorry. Sorry, everybody. This is why we don't have a great viewing. All right. Straight from Wikipedia. The Great Resignation, also known as the Big Quit or the Great Reshuffle, is an ongoing economic trend in which employees have voluntarily resigned from their jobs en masse, beginning in 2021, and it has continued on to this point. So the big question is, when will it end? Will it end? Is this a perpetual situation where there's just going to be great fluctuation in the job markets? So I have heard the term. I haven't really looked into it really until we decided to start talking about it today. And I hadn't really thought about it as well until you'd mentioned it. What is the connection between this and perhaps some of the things we're seeing in church, vocational ministry, and all these things?
Well, I mean, so let's start like this. Here's, I think, would be a good thing to ponder first and foremost, because the way we deal with this should just be, I guess, start from the very basic question of, like, okay, is there anything theological that I need to think through before joining the Great Resignation, right? So what are some principles that you would say just right off the top of your head? Because I can think of a couple, but I'll throw them out to you first. Like some things that you might say, okay, look, if you're one who's looking at your job right now, because they say, a lot of this is driven by, I'm looking at this CNBC article, and at the very end, they kind of talk through about how people are looking for, obviously, money to go to a new job, They're looking for a higher pay, right? But people are looking for, also less time for a commute now. COVID's kind of made them think, less time if I have to be, driving somewhere, all of that, thinking about lower costs of having to go to the office or what to do with, being there. If they can remote, some of those things. So I think that's kind of changed it too, is you're kind of wanting to change how we have done things and get paid a little more. So is there anything that you can think of that you would caution a Christian to say before you make a jump for whatever one of those reasons, think these things through? What would you say?
Well, I think this goes back to kind of a Lutheran Protestant principle of vocation, and that we shouldn't look at our job as simply I'm doing a job, but rather what has God called me to? And so if God's called me to serve where I'm at or to be at the company I'm at, do I view that as a calling? And I am actually going to represent Christ in that location. It doesn't mean that I can't go somewhere else. It's just generally for the Christian, there's not a coincidence. We didn't land somewhere by chance. Rather, we believe that the providence of God is moving us. And so I think one of the big questions that we should ask, and I would go to James, that passage about let us go do these things and make a profit. And I think James chastises that idea, because they didn't say we ought to have, if the Lord wills, gone and do these things. And so changing jobs isn't necessarily good or bad. It might be very good, but if it's not what God is calling you to, then it would be bad. It's wrong to step outside of God's will. And too many Christians think opportunity means God's will, and sometimes opportunity is not God's will. It's a temptation. And so, I would say that those are some things you need to wrestle with. What is God's will for your life? What has He called you to do? And if it is time to move, at least take some stock of, well, why did He have me here?
Yeah.
Did I learn? Did I accomplish the mission that He set for me to do here? Does that free me to move on? Has He been preparing me for something else? These are some questions I think we have to work through.
I think, yeah, first and foremost, actually invoking the Lord and bringing Him into the conversation before doing anything is important. I think that's a big thing when I think about the Old Testament. It's one of the big differences between just any decision making in general that like David highlighted between David and Saul. Saul seemed to be a lot more impulsive. And there's usually a phrase of David often is David sought the Lord. And when David was going to do something, he would always ask the Lord. So I think invoking the Lord, asking Him, I will say this. I think, what was it? There's the J.I. Packer book, Knowing God's Will, which is a great resource, I think, for anybody to kind of work through. It's just something to think about, right? What does that look like that God would want me to move? Is this God's will? Is this God's will for me to change this job or what? I think all of those are questions we need to look at. I think a book like that's something, if you really are struggling what does God's will sound like? All of that. I think it's a good one to do. But I think at the minimum, we should consider that. Do you think, well, let me say with this caveat too.
Yeah.
I think that culturally, though, over the last couple of years, it had been vogue to just quit and not do anything, and just say, I'm done. And I do want to caution that, like, that is a sin to just say, I'm not going to work anymore.
Yeah.
If you're capable and you're able. I mean, you think about what Paul says in 2 Thessalonians. He says, if anyone's not willing to work, he shouldn't eat. And he hammers the Christians who are able, but are, just sitting around there idle. So I don't think the answer is, I don't like my job, I'm not going to work anymore, and I'm just going to let the government take care of me. I think that's not what's intended and what you should be doing. So you should be saying, if I'm able, God has gifted me, built me up, I need to be working. I've been, it's the best of my ability to find something, right, to work. Then I need to try that. I don't think there's anything spiritually wrong with changing jobs. But I do think saying, I don't like my job, I'm going to quit and then not work, that's a problem. So, what else do you think when you think about where we're at, what we're talking about?
I mean, I really do believe we created this situation through the way we handled the pandemic. And I think that we dramatically overreacted in basically quarantining the healthy with the sick and paying people to stay home, paying businesses to be closed, destroying dreams of small business. The corporations did much better than the small business. They were able to manage. And so you have a lot of people who had dreams and had invested money into a future, and it was destroyed by the government. And then as people were finally getting back in the swing, we had this massive push for immunizations. We'll use that word. Maybe that'll keep us unflagged. That forced a lot of people who weren't sure to either take the jab or find another job. And so you have a lot of people leaving the military. We've got shortages in all kinds of places. And some of that's driving this. And nobody wants to say, well, that's a bad economic decision. And so, but what happens is, and I was reading, I'm trying to, maybe it's Covey or it's one of these leadership guys, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And culture is changed through behavior. And I think there's a biblical basis for this. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. If you don't actually obey Christ, if you don't actually have a behavior that reflects your belief, then your belief isn't really that strong. And we might have a strategy for growth and numbers and all that. But when we tell people don't work and we forbid them to work, and then we incentivize them not to work, and then we get past this and then we expect everyone's going to run back to work, we have created a culture of kind of freebies, a culture of looking for the easiest option. And when you got back to work, everybody's like, oh, why do I have to go back I was doing my job from home. Why would I ever have to go back to the building? You're taking away some flexibility that I had. The cost of inflation then and massive increase in costs. Now I'm forced to go see if there's more money to be made. And so we've really created a big mess. And I do think it's going to end. A lot of things I'm reading are like, maybe it'll never end. It'll just kind of be here forever because the boomers are going to retire as soon as this thing's getting over with. I think it'll end because fear will drive people to hold on. So right now there was a lot of opportunity. There's poor behavior. Also, we were coming off a very strong economy. And I was talking to young guys in their 20s who just, it was the first boom they'd ever seen in their life economically. And they were super excited. I'm going to invest. I'm going to be a millionaire. And I'm like, whoa. Since 2007, the economy was pretty not great. And then we have this little boom in the second half of the Trump administration, or the first half of the Trump administration. And then COVID just squashed it. And so you have a lot of immaturity and lack of discipline from that younger generation that was just getting in to how things work. And, that's been pulled out from under them as well. So again, this, I think, is a phenomenon related to how we approach the pandemic. And again, economy is not just about money. It's about how systems work. And we destroyed it in order to preserve life. And I'm not sure how well we did that. But nevertheless, here we are. And I think that's a big problem. I think there's another issue there, but I'll kick it back your way for a little bit.
Yeah, I think on the spiritual side, the way that you talked about before of recognizing like God has wired me, God has built me, that for the Christian, I think you can go, you have the freedom in Christ to go wherever you want to go, do whatever you want to go. At this stage in life where he's placed you, especially if you live in America, you have still a freedom to just say, I'm going to pack up, I'm going to move to whatever state I want to move to and take whatever job I want to take. And you have that ability to do that. And so you should be thinking though, how has God wired me? Have I completed and done what I've needed to do here where I've been? Is he done with everything that he's wanted me to do? Or I think another thing to consider too is my gifting being used here to the best of my ability? So I should be thinking about those things. I think everybody should also be thinking about in terms of wherever they go, whatever job they launch to, should be thinking about your discipleship aspect of, have I been making disciples where I've been? And what is my plan to try to make disciples where I go? So I think those are big things to consider. Outside of that, man, there is a piece of where I do feel like there's some liberty to say, if the Lord opens the door for a change of venue, a change of life, if he used these circumstances as well, and you've really sought him to do this, I think there's some freedom to just say, in God's will, if I've sought these things, I've prayed about them, and it's time to go, it's time to go. If the Lord doesn't want you there, he'll close that door, or he'll change your circumstances to bring you somewhere else eventually, if that's not the place that he's going to keep you at, right? But I mean, I feel a lot about the sovereignty of God in the sense of, if he's going to open that door and allow me to move, then God's will was to open that door and allow me to move, because you could try all you want to go to somewhere, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to move you. And so when the door does open and you think that that's the next place to go, then it's time, then pack up and go. And, it may not be that he's got you there forever, but he might move you again. So I think, and I don't think there's anything super spiritual too about saying that you got to stay at your job for a certain amount of time. I know that that's a newer thing with millennials, especially, of like, people would used to work at certain places forever. I can't remember what the stats are on that, but millennials are some of the first ones that, like, we just hop. We hop to different jobs all the time, try different things. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I do think stability is just smart, to stay stable in your career. But let me bring us to another thing that, if you don't mind, I want to change this up, because I was looking at one in front of me, an article of saying how we're seeing this possibly hit the church already. And in the same way that people's habits have changed, you and I have already talked about this. We've seen this change in attendance already. And so that's something that we're already seeing, is in the same way that people have the attitude of, I'll just jump from one job to the next. People are deciding, I'm either going to quit church and just be done, like we said, or I'm going to jump from one church to the next, or I'm going to jump from one church to the online stream of another church and not do anything. And that to me is a little more problematic than a job change. Would you agree that switching churches is a little bit more of something we should pause on than necessarily, I don't know, or maybe in their same level than jumping to a new job? What are your thoughts on something like that?
Well, I think people have been making decisions like this for a long time on, do I need to move my family? Do I need to take a new job? Do I need to follow the opportunity? And the way of processing that really should not have changed much since the pandemic. What we're seeing is that something with the result of the pandemic and the current economic situation has given people permission, perhaps, to pursue opportunity that they might not have given themselves permission to pursue before. And again, if that causes a move or something, that might require, you to find a new church. But if this is just a consumer-driven thing, and you're looking for something to make you happy, and so you're quitting your job because you're not happy there, you're starting a different job because maybe you'll be happy there, and if really you're trying to seek fulfillment because of change, and that applies to, again, I go to this church and then I go to this church, and I'm not really plugging in anywhere, I'm not investing time somewhere, there's going to be long-term consequences. And I think that spiritually, obviously, the church needs to be more than a place you go on Sunday to hear a message. It needs to be a community that you're pouring into, and in turn being poured into, to encourage you to stay close to Christ. So I think that's very significant, that you have that, and you don't necessarily get that in an online situation or fully remote. You get a little bit of that, but again, the closer you are to that group, the more that you're going to experience. And so that's important. Same thing, though, I think applies to work. And I think with this situation, there's a psychological piece here. So beyond the behavior, there's a certain sense of when you've gone through something hard and you got through it, there's a real high that happens psychologically, and also it usually is followed by a real low. And I think a lot of people, we got through the pandemic together. It was a very stressful time, and it was stressful at our jobs. It was stressful at our houses. It was stressful at our churches. And so we got through it and we rejoiced. But after we rejoiced, it was like a waves of depression, waves of just feeling that drain, I think have hit a lot of people. And this is kind of a normal thing. People will talk about, you get the high and then you get depressed. And like, now what I'm supposed to do? And the thing that was, the vision for my church was to survive that. And legitimately that, I'm not just using that as a ethereal example. That's a real example. At North Swan, losing my dad, the pastor, I've been trying to survive for 2 years, and we did it. But I don't have a long-term vision, go and make great things and all that, and so I'm kind of thinking in my own head, okay, what's phase 2, right? We survived, now what?
What's next?
And so I think a lot of pastors and a lot of people are basically just hungering for something new. And I think that's driving some of this. And they might not even be getting better jobs. They might just want something new and something fresh because we want to put this behind us. And I think that's driving some of it. And that, again, it could be good. It could be good. Mission accomplished. God's got you. He's got something new for you. But it could also just be a natural part of how life works. And when certain things happen and crises happen and we get through them, there's just a desire to put it to bed and to move on. And if that's driving you, you need to kind of have some soul searching and pray through it. And again, use the normal processes for moving. Don't just give into depression, give into hunger for something new, because God may not be through with you where he's put you yet. And opportunity isn't always good. And so that's kind of how I process that, because that's how kind of personally I felt about it. And then I turned 40, and so now I'm am I doing a midlife crisis? But I heard of a church in town that got 200 plus applications for pastor. And normally that church would have gotten maybe 10, maybe 20, 200. And they're trying to sift all this. It's because so many pastors are like, I just got to get out. I got to get to a new thing. I knew a pastor who did a great building program, new sanctuary, finished it and was so excited. The church, it had been a huge burden. And then he left the church a year later. And a lot of it was that same kind of thing. Mission accomplished. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. And I, even though now I should be reaping the rewards, I'm going to leave. And I think sometimes we cheat ourselves out of the fruit of that labor because we give in these kind of darker times or these unsettled times.
Yeah. Well, I think on the church member side, though, I was just hearing somebody talk about recently that, changes that happen in the church, because what happens too, in the same way that we view the marketplace, oh, I don't like this boss anymore, or I don't like the way that it is anymore. That's so common in the church. And I think that's where I get a little bit more frustrated on certain stuff like that, which is, if you're, in a sense, you're binding yourself to this church body, and your commitment to the church body, to the membership there, should be more than simply, I'm here as long as the pastor's here. I was hearing about just the other day of a guy, he was just saying, now this guy's gone from this church. I'm moving on. He was the reason I was there. I liked his, and then I liked his teaching. And I remember when I was a young pastor, and I'm saying younger, but I remember feeling flattered that, that people said I come because I like hearing you teach or whatnot. But there is a piece that is also sometimes a warning sign, because your hope is that you're not here for me. And I did have people that would occasionally tell me, if you're not there preaching, I'm not going to come. And initially, the first time you hear is like, man, somebody likes me. But beyond that, you're like, that's kind of messed up, because you're not really invested into the life of this church. You're invested in the person. And I think that's what happens too in a lot of churches, is it's the same thing people have been doing for years. I think it's just this whole great resignation thing. I think it's just a good reminder of things that have been happening just throughout life, But now I think I just saw the numbers like 44% of the job market is looking, right?
Yeah.
I think church people should pause a little bit more, go look. But I also think for your church, maybe you're looking for a change of venue. I don't know if that's necessarily the reason you should ever leave a church.
Yeah.
I think if God's brought you there as part of the family, just because you don't like the music anymore or the guy that they put in, those are not reasons to change. Or just because you don't like coming anymore or you're tired, like those are all reasons to not just quit. Though I think God has blessed many a pastor for shifting people out of the membership as well through that. But I just think for mature Christians, we need to have processed this a little bit more. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying it's time to move, right? It's time to move on. I think hopping a lot and never being satisfied, always finding something wrong, always looking for the next high. I see this with college students a lot, where you're at church and you're looking for the next high. Essentially, it's this year it's this church. Next year it'll be that church, and nobody ever stays put. Never you sticks it out. That's stuff that we need to stop doing and start thinking more about that. This is more than just a job. But I guess I'm a little bit more partial. Like, look for, if you're going to find a better paying job, go for it. To hop from your church, sometimes the trouble might be that you've not been more involved. You might think it sucks because you might need to ask yourself, what have I done to help with the sucky piece of it all? Have I tried to do something to help? Have I helped leadership? Have I offered my services, or have I expected it to not suck, but not be involved as well? So I don't know, man. There's just some thoughts I was having off the top of my head with this all.
Yeah, I think, that's important. One of the other things that I would kind of look to from the biblical model is, the church was growing in Jerusalem and everyone was happy, but Jesus said, go. And what caused people to go was actually persecution. It drove people out to Samaria, and then it drove them out to Judea and even to the ends of the earth. And so sometimes God will use these difficult times, and I think we're headed for difficult times, to move us, because perhaps we are too content, and we haven't been looking at our lives biblically, even the other thing, because sometimes we need to be asking, Lord, should I stay even when there's not an opportunity, because God does have plans and he does want to advance the kingdom, and maybe he wants to move you as an important part of that plan. And so I do think some of this reshuffling that's going on and moving may actually be God doing something and putting people in different places and shaking things up a bit for the kingdom. So that there could be a very positive thing going on. But right now, I just know that the sense is I need to go. I need something new. I just need a break. And that's not the best driver. The other thing I was thinking too is I believe that the groups that are most susceptible to this, I know that a lot of baby boomers chose to retire early as a result of this. And, we had enough in the nest egg, we'll go ahead and just vacate. And then I think the younger generation, the Zoomers coming in, and those that don't have kids yet are going to be more inclined to be adventurous and try new things. The in-between are those like you and I, we got kids. And anytime that you're making a move, you're thinking beyond yourself. You're also thinking about the family. What's this going to do? New schools. And, we're plugged in and we're invested. And I think that is the most biblical mindset when it comes to this, because we're not thinking about ourselves. We're thinking multi-generational. And sometimes you need to recognize that America has trained us all to be consumers and what can I get out of things. But if you look at the Puritans and you go back generations, there used to be a mindset of we're investing for our grandkids. We're investing multi-generationally here so that God will have a witness here, and he's called us to that purpose. And those are the things that I think we've really lost in our culture, because we really don't think that way. And that used to be more of the norm. Is you stayed put, you invested in an area, families were multi-generational. And then, yes, opportunity pulled a few out here and there, but you would find that a lot of people would live in the same place for a long period of time. And I think that is a good thing, unless God's calling you out. But that's another thing I just think would help balance view of life, that it's not about what can I get in this moment. It's really what can I give to the next generation? What can I do to leave earth better than when I got here, more following Christ, more in line, that the next generation will have a chance to advance the kingdom of God. And the escapism that I'm seeing is the opposite of building the kingdom. And so that's another thought, I think, as well. Think about the people that you won't impact if you leave. Think about the relationships you've invested in at your job that maybe they're primed for the gospel. Think about the things that are going to take 2 to 3 to 4 years for you to regain at the new place that you have today because you've been planted. And those are the kind of things that I think they're not tangible when you're looking at a move and you're looking at money.
Yeah, man, I think you've said it really well. I think in all of this, as we're talking about people changing up their lives, moving around, switching up, I think that, if you're listening to what we're saying, is like, there once again, it comes back down to the liberty that we have as in Christ, that there's nothing that says you got to stay put. There's nothing that says you have to go. And there's a lot of God may be changing your circumstances to, in fact, move you. Yep. God may be changing your circumstances and wanting to keep you, through the hard time. Those are just things that at the end of the day, I think everybody needs to be willing to say, have I spent time with the Lord? Have I sought him on these things? Have I sought godly counsel through it all before doing something like this? And because I don't think there's any magic formula. There's no, I mean, if you want to cast lots and ask the Lord to be over the lots on that, go for it. I think could be somewhat legit. I don't know if I'd want to do it completely like that. But I just think that at the end of the day, you need to take more note of cash, more than just cash, more than just I'm tired, but really seeking, say, is this what you want me to do? And not just, God, this is what I'm going to do. Please bless my decisions. Because I don't think that's how God's going to change you and gear you up for what's coming as well. Because I think if God's going to move you, he's going to move you. If God doesn't want you to move and you're begging him to move you and just bless your plans, and you're going to force it, sometimes God has a way of just saying, fine, you get what you want. And you may not get what you may not want what you're about to get because he knew it, so there's all those stuff to consider too. But at the end of the day, I think it just comes back down to seek the Lord. Yeah. And if you're going to jump, have fun, make a jump,
right? And it's not a sin to look, and that's, I think that's the thing, is we keep saying you'll find God's will, but a lot of the ways you find God's will is you pray about it, you read the scripture, you trust God, and then you step out in faith sometimes. And then you pray, God, shut the door, and he'll slam it in your face. And you're like, well, that was a waste of time, but it wasn't, because you were seeking the Lord and you were walking with him. And that's okay too, because, I always think of Paul trying to take the gospel up into Asia, and he's blocked. He can't get there, and they go north and they can't go. And he ends up headed out to Macedonia. But again, he wasn't sitting on his hands asking God to move him. He was trying to do the best he could with what God had called him to do. Yeah. And that was testing some boundaries. And I think that's helpful too, sometimes too, because you might be, I'm wired to stay put. So I'm the guy that needs a little bit of a kick in the pants from the Lord to say, get moving. And some people are adventurers and they don't want to stay anywhere more than 5 minutes. Some of that is just kind of how God made us. Yeah. But, so you might be missing an opportunity if you're not looking and asking and kind of exploring what God could do. Yeah. And that, just because a lot of people are changing jobs doesn't mean that you should sit on your hands. At the same time, if you're just looking because you're dissatisfied, that may not be a good enough reason. Yeah. And then spiritually, again, I think we both agree. You're always called to the church. If you're just shopping around right now because you're consumer driven, then you've missed Christianity, because Christianity is about selflessness, not about what you can get. So, hey, man, I think we've hammered this one as much as we can. I don't know if there's anything else that I could even offer to that. I think it's just helpful to think through. Like I said, this is something I started even thinking about just last week. I was just recognize that it's hitting everywhere. And so it's good to just kind of talk through it with you.
So I'm done. If you're done, I don't know, man. We can do another topic another time, but I think we're killing this dead horse even more so.
We should do a whole hour on casting lots. I think that's what we should do next.
I think it's biblical, man. I think we'll cast lots. I think it's good. We should.
All right.
There's something to be said.
I'm good to close it if you are.
All right, let's do it. Let's close together. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look with favor on you and give you peace. All right. God bless you guys. We'll talk to you later. Thanks. See you next time.
Take care.